this episode, we're going to take you sailing on Eros. We'll teach you about her schooner rig. We'll show you how we raise and set the sails. We'll take you racing on our first classic yacht regatta. And we'll teach you about our fisherman's sail. We hope you'll come along for the ride. Eros is a schooner. In simple terms, a schooner has the largest mast on the rear end of the boat, or on the aft end. So you can see here that we have a large main mast on the rear, and up forward is called the foremast. In this video, we're carrying our 4 main sails. The main sail is on the aft, that's the big sail at the back of the boat. There's a main staysail just forward of that in between the masts. And in front of the mast, we have our staysail and our jib. When we raise our fisherman's sail, which is the large rectangular sail in between the masts. Here you can see the fisherman's sail being raised in the middle of a race. This illustration shows Eros with her original rig. This is from an article about Eros in Yachting World magazine from August 1937. This diagram shows Eros with a mainsail, a gaff foresail, a foregaff topsail, a staysail, a jib, and a jib topsail. This article has her launch name of Jeanery apparently typed in, while her pre-launch name of White Bitch is seemingly crossed out. These are the only 2 photos we could find of Eros with her original gaff foresail rig. Later, in the 1950s, under the ownership of Stavros Niarchos, Eros was converted to a staysail schooner. This means the sails between the masts were changed. Gone was the gaff foresail, which was replaced with a main staysail and a fisherman. We found a couple of photos of her sailing in that era, and this really cool shot of Eros in Monaco in the 1960s. In the 1990s, Eros underwent one more transition. Her sail plan stayed the same, but her main mast was increased in height by 20 feet, and a 12-foot bowsprit was added to her bow, taking her overall length from 103 to 115 feet. We think her current configuration is her best look. Here are her transitions all in one image. Here you can clearly see how the main mast gets a lot taller in the third drawing. The first sail to be raised is always the mainsail. The 700-pound sail needs to be raised up about 100 feet, so it's very hard work. With the race crew on board, we raise it by hand. It takes about 3 minutes that way. With our normal crew, we raise it partially by hand, as high as we can get it before we're toast. Then we use the hydraulic capstan, or winch, to get it the rest of the way up. The last few feet are tensioned on the mast winch. This way is a bit slower than with the full race crew. The entire time the sails are being raised, Justin has the really hard job of pointing the bow directly into the wind. That's sarcasm. It's actually the easiest job on the boat. He just stands there and screams unintelligible commands to the rest of the crew, which we pretend to understand. It makes him feel important. The next sail up is the main staysail. Amy releases the sail ties, and Cade starts hoisting the sail. This sail weighs a lot less than the mainsail, so you can get it almost all the way up by hand. Last foot or 2 go on the winch just to get it really tight.
And once that starts getting hard, I'll go the other way.
If we have a race crew on board, we can raise 3 or 4 sails at the same time. But with just our smaller crew here, we just raise them one at a time. Last to go up is the jib. Cade hoists it up most of the way by hand. This one has a block and tackle on it, so it goes up about 80 feet, which means there's 160 feet of jib halyard. Jared jumps in to do the last little bit, throw it on the winch. Justin bears away to port. The wind fills the sails. Amy does a little trimming on the jib, and if all goes well, this should be the final result. The wind fills the sails, quickly accelerates up to 7 or 8 knots. All is good in the world. Bringing the sails down is called striking the sails. Amy lays out the jib halyard so it will go quickly up the mast as the sail is dropped. You don't have to do this, but you do want to make sure you have some method of having it not tangle up. So we drop the jib. 4 of us are up there just bringing it down, getting it out of the wind. We will now drop the staysail, which you can just see a little bit happening there on the corner. And now the main staysail gets put into the boom crutch, and that sail is dropped, pulled all the way down, and lastly Amy releases the halyard on the mainsail. Jared's up there. He's going to jump on top of it to pack it down and grab the halyard. And then lastly, you need to furl all the sails nicely, fold them up so that they are not grabbing a bunch of wind. Tie them nice and tight along the boom so they look proper, ship shape and Bristol fashion, as they say. And you can see the staysail is now looking pretty good, and the 4 staysail is getting it taken care of as well. Our first regatta on Eros was the 2017 Antigua Classic Yacht Regatta, a 4-day event featuring about 50 classics. Beautiful? Check. Windy? Check. Fun? Double check. Scary? Check. On board Eros were about 20 amateurs and a handful of experienced racers. Some had never sailed before. This was before Justin, Amy, and Jared had ever set foot on board Eros. Of course, we knew how to sail Eros, but we had never flown our large jib, and we had never flown the Fisherman. The large jib was easy enough to understand, but its sheets ran much further astern, which was new for us, and because it was so much larger than our day jib, it was extremely difficult to sheet in on our undersized manual winches. The Fisherman, well, that's a different story. We sailed safe races. We didn't push it too hard. We didn't even try to fly the Fisherman until the last day, and we stayed out of trouble at the crowded starting areas. But day 3 was insane. While approaching the starting line, some of the largest and most powerful schooners ever to sail converged upon us, surrounded us, and raced with us across the starting line. At one point, Mariette and Mary Rose were less than 50 feet from us. That's nothing in small maneuverable boats, but in large boats that take minutes to turn, it's outright terrifying. A collision between 2 yachts at 200 tons plus each could cause a lot of carnage, maybe even death. In fact, Mariette had been involved in a collision in France that resulted in a death, so this was a big deal. The boats jockeyed for position and exercised their right of way. We did our best to stay out of trouble. Finally, relative calm ensued. The larger, faster schooners had their fishermen up and slowly pulled away from us. In fact, most of these yachts were designed for racing, while Eros was designed for cruising, so we knew we'd have a tough time competing. In truth, we were afforded front row seats to one of the most exciting yacht races one can imagine. For classic lovers, this was the Monaco Grand Prix of yachting, and our beloved Eros and her amateur crew was right in the middle of it. Are you ready to talk fisherman? It's actually called a fisherman's staysail, so one can assume it was somehow used on fishing schooners in the early 20th century. The fisherman's main purpose is to fill the gap between the masts and grab wind higher off the water, providing extra power and speed to the yacht. While typically used on light air days, they can be used in heavier wind on sturdier rigs with more experienced crew. The Fisherman is a trapezoidal-shaped sail. On Eros, the Fisherman is the 3rd largest sail after the mainsail and the racing jib. The mainsail is 1,683 square feet, the racing jib is 1,300, the Fisherman is 1,173, the main staysail is 683, and the forestaysail is 419 square feet. The cruising jib is 846 square feet. When racing with the Fisherman up, Eros carries 4,258 square feet of sail. Because Eros has several shrouds or cables between the two masts, the fisherman can't be tacked or jibed. This means it needs to come all the way down first, then is hoisted up on the other side after the turn. We only put it up on long runs, otherwise it will just have to come down again, and that's a lot of work. The fisherman is attached on all four corners with lines. The top two corners, the throat and the peak, are hoisted up halyards at the top of the two masts. The forward bottom corner, the tack, is winched downwards, and the clew is attached to a sheet through a pulley at the end of the main boom. The reason the fisherman is so hard to hoist is that the sail is full of wind the entire time. Most sails are hoisted with the boat pointing directly in the wind when there's no load on them. Not the fisherman. It's hoisted when the other sails are up and already powered. When raising the fisherman in a race, Eros generally has 3 or 4 people holding it and easing it out over the side, as 2 teams of 3 people work the 2 halyards. So the raise needs about 10 people. The strategy is to raise the throat to the top of the foremast first. The peak is slowly pulled up the main mast, but leaving as much slack as possible, so the foremast team doesn't have to fight a full pulling sail. But even so, it's incredibly hard work. They grind for several minutes until it's all the way up. They then winch the downhaul at the tack, and the foremast part of the mission is complete. Now 2 teams simultaneously winch the peak to the top of the main mast and the clew out the main boom. If we're sailing on a reach or a broad reach, those can be eased some so the sail balloons a bit like a spinnaker. But if we're pointing higher, then these 2 need to be sheeted in tightly. With the fisherman up, Eros picks up about a knot or more of speed and feels a lot more stable. It makes a huge difference. Bringing the sail down is obviously a lot easier, but still a tricky maneuver. It's still full because we're still sailing hard, so it comes down under load. The halyards are both released gently and eased down. A couple crew pull the downhaul at the tack. Once that part of the sail is back at deck level, more sailors can converge upon it, grabbing and pulling and wrestling it back to the deck where it's lashed in place. The race crew is taught to always keep their body between the sail and the center of the boat. If they stand on the outside of the fisherman, they may be pushed overboard. I'm happy to report that we've raised and lowered this sail hundreds of times now and have never had an incident or injury, and we plan to keep it that way. This is a page from the Antigua Classic Regatta program. We sure hope that sailors know that this is what our fisherman is supposed to look like as it's halfway up the mast, and not that we're a bunch of idiots that have no idea what we're doing. The next few episodes take place in the U.S. Virgin Islands. You'll learn about Jared's cure for seasickness. You'll join us on an invigorating hike and on a crazy paddleboard outing.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like our video and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time on Sailing Eros.